When I declined to finance my daughter's extravagant celebration, she severed all contact. Weeks later, she extended an olive branch dinner invitation. Upon my arrival, 4 attorneys sat waiting with legal paperwork. She declared, "Execute these documents, or you'll be permanently barred from seeing your grandson again." I calmly retrieved my phone, dialed a number, and announced, "I'll reveal everything. Welcome, dear listeners of the Voice of the Heart. Thank you for every like, comment, and warm word. They inspire us to create new, heartfelt stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes, and enjoy listening." The burgundy sweater felt unusually heavy across my shoulders. I'd crafted it myself 4 winters back when Michael initially courted Rebecca. Then I considered her charming. Then I believed my son prioritized more than wealth. Now, adjusting the gentle fabric over my 62-year-old body, I questioned whether this marked my final family visit wearing it. 3 months had elapsed since our devastating argument regarding celebration expenses. $52,000. That sum Michael and Rebecca demanded I contribute for one evening. "Mother, you're being irrational," Michael had screamed, his complexion crimson with fury. "You possess Father's retirement funds sitting idle. Don't you desire my happiness?" I attempted explaining that joy didn't require crystal fixtures or exotic blooms. I'd proposed $7,500, sufficient for a lovely ceremony at the neighborhood chapel. But Michael regarded me as though I'd struck him, like I was the most terrible mother imaginable. "Very well," he'd stated, grasping Rebecca's hand. "If you refuse assistance, we don't require you." The quietude that ensued was the type that shatters hearts. 9 weeks passed. No telephone conversations, no visits, no photographs of little Oliver, my 4-year-old grandson, who previously rushed into my embrace every Sunday. I occasionally drive past their residence, hoping to glimpse him playing outdoors. The mailbox I decorated with ladybugs for Oliver's 3rd birthday remained vacant. The playground equipment I'd purchased last Christmas sat unused. My heart felt like it was fragmenting into countless pieces daily. Then came Wednesday. I was tending my rose bushes when the telephone rang. Michael's voice sounded altered, gentle, almost like the young boy who once assisted me preparing muffins. "Mother," he said softly, "I've been reflecting. Perhaps we both expressed things we regretted. Rebecca and I wish to invite you for dinner. You understand, discuss matters properly." My hands trembled holding the phone. Perhaps the silence had taught him what truly mattered. Perhaps fatherhood had demonstrated that family superseded elaborate festivities. "I'd appreciate that," I whispered, already planning my attire, my words to repair our damaged relationship. "How about that Italian restaurant on Maple Avenue, Antonio's?" Antonio's, where I'd celebrated Michael's birthday annually until he turned 21, where we'd shared lasagna and laughed at the amusing murals, where he discussed his first position, his first apartment, his aspirations. "Perfect," I said, feeling hope flourish in my chest for the first time in weeks. The journey to Antonio's felt like time travel, past the middle school where Michael had played basketball, past the bookstore where we'd spent numerous Saturday mornings exploring novels together, past the bakery where he'd secured his first summer employment. Each memory felt precious now, like photographs I'd feared losing forever. Perhaps tonight we could create new memories. Perhaps we could remember why we loved each other before money interfered. Antonio's appeared identical, wooden wine barrels suspended from the ceiling. ivy draped along the walls, the aroma of garlic and pasta welcoming me like an old companion. Michael was already there, occupying our customary corner booth, but something felt amiss. He wore his costly suit, the one reserved for significant business conferences. Rebecca sat beside him in a gown that probably cost more than my monthly utility expenses. And there were others at the table, strangers in dark attire, who appeared very serious. "Mother?" Michael stood, but his smile seemed forced, like he was performing in a drama he didn't want to participate in. "Thank you for coming." I embraced him, but his body felt rigid, uncomfortable. "Who are your companions?" I asked, observing the 4 men in expensive suits who were examining me like I was some problem requiring resolution. "These are some business colleagues," Rebecca said hastily. Her voice was overly bright, overly cheerful. "They wanted to meet you." Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't a family dinner. This was something else entirely. "Business colleagues," I repeated, sitting down slowly. The men were older, professional appearing. They carried briefcases and stern expressions. One of them, with silver hair and piercing eyes, leaned forward. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm William Parker. I'm an attorney. We've prepared some documents that we believe will benefit everyone." My hands began shaking. Documents at a family dinner. This felt like a trap. "What type of documents?" I asked, though my heart was already racing. Michael couldn't meet my gaze. Rebecca was fidgeting with her engagement ring. The attorney opened his briefcase and extracted a thick folder. "Simply stated, Mrs. Johnson, we're recommending that you transfer power of attorney to Michael and Rebecca. You're residing alone now, and managing finances can be complex for someone your age." My age. I was 62, not 92. I balanced my checkbook monthly, paid my bills punctually. I wasn't confused or unable to think clearly. "I don't understand," I said, looking at Michael. "Why would I need someone else managing my money?" Another attorney, younger with restless energy, spoke up. "Well, Mrs. Johnson, you have been making some questionable decisions recently, refusing to help with important family expenses, living in that large house all by yourself. Perhaps it's time to let your family help you make better choices. Better choices like spending $52,000 on one party, like throwing away my life savings on imported champagne and designer flowers." The third attorney, who hadn't spoken yet, slid papers across the table. "If you could just sign here, Mrs. Johnson, we can arrange everything tonight. Your son and daughter-in-law only want what's best for you." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Power of attorney, legal guardianship, financial management. Words that meant they wanted to control everything my husband and I had worked 38 years to build. "And if I don't sign?" I asked quietly. Michael finally looked at me, and I saw a stranger, someone I didn't recognize, someone cold and calculating. "Mother," he said, his voice flat and emotionless, "you need to consider Oliver. He needs stability, security. If you're not willing to help your family, maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family." The words struck me like physical blows. Rebecca nodded, her face showing no compassion. "Oliver needs grandparents who care about his future," she added, "who want to help his parents provide for him." "Are you saying I can't see Oliver anymore?" I whispered, my heart breaking into even smaller pieces. Michael shrugged like he was discussing the weather instead of destroying our relationship. "That depends on you, Mother. Sign the papers and we can all be a happy family again. Refuse, and well, We'll have to protect Oliver from negative influences. Negative influences. That's what my son thought I was. A negative influence on the grandson I loved more than my own life. The restaurant felt like it was spinning around me. Other families were eating dinner, laughing, enjoying each other's company. Normal families who weren't blackmailing each other over legal documents. I looked at the papers again, seeing my entire future disappearing. My house, my savings account, my independence, everything I'd need to care for myself as I aged. All of it would belong to Michael and Rebecca. All of it would disappear into their expensive lifestyle. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with my neighbor just last week. Mrs. Chen had warned me about this exact situation. Her own son had attempted the same thing, using the grandchildren as weapons to access money. "Patricia," she'd said, "if your family ever tries pressuring you into signing papers, you call my attorney immediately. Promise me." I thought she was being paranoid. I thought my Michael would never hurt me like that. But here I was, surrounded by attorneys, being threatened with losing Oliver forever. Time to make that phone call. I reached into my purse, moving slowly and deliberately. Michael leaned forward, probably thinking I was reaching for a pen to sign his papers. Instead, I pulled out my phone. "Mother," Michael said, his voice sharp with warning. "What are you doing?" "Making a phone call," I said calmly, scrolling through my contacts. "Hello, Catherine. It's Patricia Johnson, Mrs. Chen's neighbor. Yes, I need you to come to Antonio's restaurant on Maple Avenue right now. Bring the documents we discussed." I ended the call and placed the phone on the table. The silence was deafening. William Parker, the head attorney, cleared his throat nervously. "Mrs. Johnson, perhaps we should discuss this more privately. Family matters can be emotional." "Can they?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "How thoughtful of you to notice." Michael's face was turning red. "Mother, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Just sign the papers and we can go home." "Whose home?" I asked. "Mine, which you want to control, or yours, which Oliver isn't allowed to leave to visit me?" Rebecca spoke up, her voice getting higher and more frantic. "This is ridiculous, Michael. We don't need to sit here and listen to this." She started to gather her purse, but Michael put his hand on her arm. "No," he said firmly. "We finish this tonight." He turned to me with eyes that looked nothing like the little boy I'd raised. "Mother, you're being stubborn. We're trying to help you. Don't you want Oliver to have nice things? Don't you want him to attend good schools?" "I want Oliver to have grandparents who love him without conditions," I said. "I want him to learn that family doesn't blackmail each other. I want him to understand that love isn't something you have to purchase." The attorneys were whispering among themselves now, looking uncomfortable. This wasn't proceeding according to their plan. They'd expected an elderly woman who would be easily intimidated. Instead, they were dealing with someone who'd spent 38 years standing up to bigger bullies than them. "How much money do you have in your savings account, Mother?" Michael asked suddenly. The question was so personal, so invasive, that I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "That's none of your business, Michael." "Actually," said the younger attorney, "if you sign these documents, it becomes very much his business. Full financial transparency, complete asset management. It's all in the paperwork." He smiled like he was doing me a favor instead of planning to steal everything I owned. "And what about my house?" I asked. "The house where you grew up, Michael. The house where Oliver loves to play in the garden." Michael shrugged again. that casual gesture that cut deeper than any knife. Houses are just investments, Mother. Rebecca and I could sell it and invest the money more wisely. Maybe get you a nice apartment somewhere more suitable for someone your age. Somewhere they could control me. Somewhere they could keep me away from Oliver whenever they wanted. Somewhere I'd have no independence, no freedom, no life. That's when I heard the restaurant door open behind me, high heels clicking on the wooden floor. A confident voice asking the hostess for directions to our table. Catherine Walsh appeared beside our booth, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who dealt with family financial abuse many times before. At 58, she was petite but fierce, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes that immediately assessed the situation. "I apologize for being late," she said, not sounding sorry at all. Catherine Walsh, she introduced herself to the table, Mrs. Johnson's attorney. The four men suddenly looked less confident, less in control. Catherine pulled up a chair and opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Now then," she said cheerfully, "I understand there are some documents you'd like Mrs. Johnson to sign. Before we proceed, I think you should see what she's already put in place." She spread papers across the table, official documents with legal seals and formal language that made Michael's face go pale. "Irrevocable trust," Catherine explained conversationally, as if she were discussing the weather. "Established last week after Mrs. Chen warned Patricia that her family might try something like this. All of Patricia's assets, her house, her savings, her investments, have been transferred to the Oliver Johnson Educational Trust." Michael grabbed the papers, reading frantically. "What does this mean?" he demanded. Catherine smiled sweetly. "It means your son will be very well provided for. College tuition, medical expenses, educational opportunities, everything a loving grandmother would want for her grandchild." "But," Catherine continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge, "neither you nor Rebecca will have access to those funds. The trust is managed by an independent financial institution with myself as the legal overseer. Patricia receives a comfortable monthly allowance for her living expenses, and everything else is protected for Oliver's future." Rebecca made a choking sound. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "We're her family." "Yes," Catherine agreed calmly, "and family members who truly care about each other don't threaten to withhold grandchildren unless they get money." Michael was reading the trust documents, his hands shaking with anger. "This is impossible. We had an agreement." "What agreement?" I asked quietly. "The agreement where you'd blackmail me into signing over my life savings? Or the agreement where you'd keep my grandson away from me unless I paid for your expensive wedding?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He'd never expected me to fight back. He'd expected me to be weak, scared, desperate to see Oliver. William Parker cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Walsh, I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Our documents were prepared in good faith to help manage Mrs. Johnson's affairs." Catherine laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of steel. "Good faith? Is that what you call meeting at a restaurant under false pretenses to pressure an elderly woman into signing over her assets?" She pulled out another folder. "Because I have some documents here that might interest you." "Photographs," Catherine said, spreading them across the table. "Michael and Rebecca meeting with you gentlemen at your office 3 weeks ago. Michael providing financial information about his mother without her knowledge or consent. Rebecca researching the value of Patricia's house and property. The pictures were clear, damning evidence of a conspiracy that had been planned long before tonight's dinner. "How did you get these?" Michael whispered, his face now completely white. Mrs. Chen suspected something like this might happen, Catherine explained. She hired a private investigator to keep an eye on Patricia's family. "Imagine our surprise when we discovered your little scheme," she turned to the four attorneys. "Gentlemen, I hope you're prepared to explain to the State Bar Association why you participated in an attempt to defraud an elderly woman. Elder abuse is a serious crime in this state." The younger attorney was already gathering his papers, mumbling something about misunderstandings and miscommunications. "This isn't over," Michael said, standing up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. "You're my mother. That money should be mine." The words hung in the air like poison gas. 32 years of raising him, loving him, sacrificing for him. And this is what it had come to. Money mattered more than everything else. Our relationship, his son's need for a grandmother, the family we'd built together. None of it mattered compared to getting his hands on my savings account. "You're right," I said quietly, standing up to face my son. "I am your mother. I'm the woman who walked the floor with you when you had colic. I'm the woman who saved money for 3 years to buy you that motorcycle you wanted for Christmas. I'm the woman who worked extra shifts to pay for your college education. And this is how you repay me, by trying to steal everything I have." My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking with every word. Rebecca grabbed Michael's arm. "Come on," she hissed. "Let's go. We don't need this." But Michael stood there staring at me with something that might have been regret, or maybe just anger that his plan had failed. "Oliver needs things, Mother. Good schools, nice clothes. We're trying to give him opportunities." "Oliver needs love," I said firmly. "He needs family who care about him more than money. He needs to learn that relationships aren't about what you can get from people." "If you walk out that door," I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word, "if you continue to use Oliver as a weapon against me, then you're showing him that love is conditional, that grandparents are only valuable if they can pay for things. Is that really the lesson you want to teach your son?" For a moment, just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy I'd raised, the child who'd cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly. But then Rebecca tugged his arm again, and the moment was gone. "Fine," Michael said coldly. "If this is how you want to play it, don't expect to see Oliver anytime soon." He turned to walk away, then paused. "And don't expect us at Thanksgiving." The threat was meant to hurt me, to make me change my mind and give him what he wanted. Instead, it just made me sad. Sad that my son had become someone who would use a 4-year-old child as a bargaining chip. Sad that he valued money more than the mother who had loved him unconditionally for 32 years. After they left, Catherine and I sat in the suddenly quiet restaurant. Other diners were looking at us curiously, probably wondering about the family drama that had just unfolded. "Are you okay?" Catherine asked gently. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My son had just tried to steal my life savings. My grandson was being used as a weapon against me. My family was broken, maybe permanently, but I was still in control of my own life. I still had my house, my independence, my dignity. "I think I will be," I said finally. "It hurts. It hurts more than I ever imagined it could. But I'm not going to let them destroy me." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Good. That's exactly the right attitude." She gathered her papers efficiently. "The trust is ironclad, Patricia. Even if they try to contest it legally, which I doubt they will, Oliver's future is secure, and you'll receive enough each month to live comfortably without worrying about money." She paused. "What will you do now?" I looked around the restaurant at the decorations that had seemed cheerful when I arrived, and now felt like remnants of a different life. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I'm going to make myself a cup of tea, and I'm going to start figuring out how to build a life that doesn't revolve around people who see me as a bank account instead of a human being." It sounded lonely when I said it out loud, but it also sounded free. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no distractions, just me and the road and the weight of what had just happened. I passed Michael's house where the lights were on in Oliver's bedroom. Was he asking where Grandma was? Did he miss our Sunday afternoon baking sessions? Or had they already started teaching him that grandparents were only useful when they provided expensive gifts? The thought made my chest ache, but I kept driving. My house felt different when I unlocked the front door. Emptier maybe, but also more peaceful. This was my space now, not something that Michael and Rebecca could take away from me, not something I had to defend or justify. I was home. I made that cup of tea I'd promised myself, Earl Grey with lemon, and sat in my favorite chair by the window. The chair where I'd nursed Michael as a baby, where I'd read him bedtime stories, where I'd worried about him during his teenage years. The phone rang around 10:00. For a moment my heart jumped. Maybe Michael had come to his senses. Maybe he'd realized what he'd almost lost and wanted to apologize. But the caller ID showed Mrs. Chen's number. "Patricia, how did it go tonight?" Her voice was full of concern and barely contained curiosity. I told her everything: the lawyers, the documents, Michael's threats, Catherine's dramatic rescue. She listened without interrupting, making small sounds of outrage at all the right moments. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished, "I'm so sorry it came to this, but I'm proud of you for standing up to them. It takes courage to choose dignity over family pressure." Did it? It hadn't felt courageous. It had felt like survival, like choosing between drowning slowly and swimming to shore, even if that shore looked lonely and unfamiliar. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you discover who you are when you're not being manipulated," she said firmly, "and I think you might be surprised by what you find." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about Oliver, my sweet grandson who loved dinosaurs and fairy tales and chocolate chip cookies warm from the oven. Would he understand someday why Grandma had to protect herself? Would he remember the woman who taught him to plant seeds in the garden? Or would he only know the stories his parents told him about the selfish grandmother who wouldn't help the family? The uncertainty was painful, but I couldn't let it change my decision. 4 weeks passed before I heard from Michael again. I'd started a routine: morning coffee on the porch, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, evening phone calls with Mrs. Chen. I'd even started volunteering at the animal shelter, helping socialize cats and dogs. It felt good to be useful, to be valued for something other than my bank account balance. That's where I was when Michael called, playing with a litter of kittens who tumbled over each other in their eagerness for attention. "Mother," his voice sounded different, uncertain, maybe even ashamed. "Can we talk?" I excused myself from the kitten room and stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. "What do you want to talk about, Michael?" I kept my voice neutral, careful not to show the hope that was blooming dangerously in my chest. "Oliver keeps asking about you," he said quietly. "He wants to know when Grandma is coming to visit. He misses our Sunday baking sessions." The words were like warm honey, sweet and healing. "And what do you tell him?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I tell him that Grandma is busy," he admitted. "But he's smart, Mother. He knows something's wrong. Yesterday, he asked if you were sick, if that's why you don't come see him anymore." I closed my eyes, picturing Oliver's confused little face. He was too young to understand adult problems, too innocent to realize that his father had tried to use him as a weapon against someone who loved him. "I miss him too," I said honestly. "I miss him more than you can imagine." "Then come over," Michael said quickly. "Come for dinner. Rebecca's making beef stew." The invitation sounded casual, but I could hear the desperation underneath. They needed something from me. Maybe not money this time, but something. "What about the lawyers?" I asked. "What about the power of attorney documents?" Another pause. We decided not to pursue that route." "Did you?" I said dryly. "Or did Catherine Walsh explain that elder abuse is a felony?" Michael's silence was answer enough. "Mother, look. Maybe we approached things the wrong way, but we're still family. Oliver needs his grandmother." He was right about that. Oliver did need his grandmother. But did his grandmother need to be manipulated and threatened to maintain that relationship? "I'll think about it," I said. "But Michael, if I come over, there will be conditions." "Conditions?" He sounded surprised. His mother had never made demands before. His mother had always been accommodating, flexible, eager to keep everyone happy. "No discussion of money," I said firmly. "No lawyers, no documents, no attempts to make me feel guilty about the wedding expenses. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be because you value me as a person, not as a source of funding." The silence stretched so long, I wondered if he'd hung up. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we can do that." Could they? Or would this just be another attempt to manipulate me, more subtle than the first, but just as calculated? "I'll come Sunday," I decided, "for 2 hours. And Michael, if there's any mention of money or lawyers or what I should do with my assets, I leave immediately and don't come back." "Mother, you don't have to threaten us." "I'm not threatening anyone, Michael. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my uncertain mood. I changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something that looked grandmotherly, but not weak. Something that said, "I love Oliver, but also, I won't be pushed around." Finally, I settled on a simple green dress and the silver earrings my husband had given me for our 25th anniversary. Armor disguised as accessories. The drive to Michael's house felt like traveling to a foreign country where I didn't know the language or customs. Oliver was waiting by the window when I pulled into the driveway. His face lit up like Christmas morning when he saw my car. "Grandma," he squealed, running out the front door before Michael or Rebecca could stop him. He launched himself into my arms with the fearless love that only small children possess. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the money, not the lawyers, not the bitter words that had been spoken. Just this perfect little person who loved me unconditionally. "I missed you so much," Oliver said, patting my cheeks with his small hands. "Where were you? Daddy said you were busy, but I thought maybe you didn't love me anymore." The words were like arrows straight to my heart. This innocent child had been suffering because of his parents' greed and my need to protect myself. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, holding him tight. "I will always love you. Nothing in the whole world could change that." It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what happened with Michael and Rebecca. Michael appeared in the doorway, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. Rebecca stood behind him, her face carefully neutral. "Come in, Mother," Michael said. "Dinner's almost ready." The house looked the same. Expensive furniture, perfect decorations, everything arranged to impress visitors. But it felt different now, less welcoming, more like a stage set where everyone was playing roles instead of being themselves. Oliver grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the living room. "Come see my new train set." The train set was elaborate, with tiny buildings and miniature people, expensive like everything else in Michael and Rebecca's world. "Daddy bought it for me," Oliver said proudly. "But it's not as fun as the baking we used to do." He looked up at me with hopeful eyes. "Can we bake cookies after dinner?" Before I could answer, Rebecca spoke up. "Oliver, honey, Grandma can't stay long tonight. Maybe next time." The message was clear. This visit was temporary, conditional, subject to their approval. Dinner was awkward, conversations stilted and careful. Michael and Rebecca asked polite questions about my volunteer work at the animal shelter, my garden, my health. Surface-level topics that avoided anything important or meaningful. Oliver chattered about preschool and his friends, the only genuine voice at the table. I found myself studying Michael's face, looking for traces of the little boy who'd once helped me bake cookies and believed in magic. He was still there, buried under layers of adult disappointment and financial pressure. "Mother," Michael said as Rebecca served dessert, "I want you to know that we're grateful for everything you've done for us over the years. The help with the down payment on this house, Oliver's daycare expenses, all of it." Here it comes, I thought. The setup for another request. "We know you have your own future to think about," he continued carefully. "Your own needs and plans." Was this an apology? An acknowledgement that they'd been wrong? Or just another approach to the same goal? "I'm glad you understand that," I said quietly. Oliver was building a tower with his dinner rolls, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around the table. "Michael, I need you to know something. I love you. I love Rebecca. I love Oliver more than my own life. But I won't be manipulated or threatened. I won't sign over control of my finances to anyone. If you can accept that, we can have a relationship. If you can't, then we have a problem." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, strong, definitive, final. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Of course we can accept that," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We just want what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone," I repeated, "is honesty. No more scheming, no more lawyers, no more using Oliver as a weapon. If you want my help with something, ask directly. If I say no, accept it gracefully. That's how healthy families work." Michael nodded slowly, like a student learning a difficult lesson. As I prepared to leave, Oliver clung to my legs like a koala bear. "Don't go, Grandma. Stay for my tea party." It broke my heart to disappoint him, but I'd promised myself I would stick to my boundaries. "Next Sunday," I told him, kneeling down to his level. "If Mommy and Daddy say it's okay, we'll have the best tea party ever." I looked up at Michael and Rebecca. "If it's okay?" I repeated meaningfully. They nodded, probably relieved that I was leaving before any uncomfortable topics came up. The following weeks settled into a careful routine. Sunday visits with Oliver, always brief, always supervised. Michael and Rebecca were polite but distant, treating me like a slightly dangerous relative who needed to be managed carefully. We talked about weather, Oliver's preschool activities, neutral topics that wouldn't lead to conflict. It wasn't the warm family relationship I'd once dreamed of, but it was better than the Cold War we'd been fighting. At least I could see Oliver. At least he knew his grandmother loved him. But Oliver was growing up fast, asking harder questions. "Grandma, why don't you live with us?" he asked one Sunday while we colored pictures at the kitchen table. "My friend Jake's grandma lives in their house." How could I explain to a 4-year-old that his parents had tried to steal my money, that family relationships were more complicated than he could understand? "Sometimes grandmas need their own houses," I said carefully, "but that doesn't mean we love each other any less." He accepted this with the simple trust that children have, but I knew the questions would get harder as he got older. 4 months into our new routine, Michael called with news that changed everything. "Mother, Rebecca's pregnant again." His voice carried a mixture of excitement and worry. "We're due in the summer." Another grandchild, another innocent person who would be caught in the middle of our family's problems. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it despite everything. "How is Rebecca feeling?" "Tired, scared. The pregnancy is high risk, and the doctor wants her to take it easy." There was a pause. "Mother, we might need some help with Oliver." And there it was, the reason for the call. They needed something from me again. Not money this time, but childcare. "What kind of help?" I asked carefully. "Well, if Rebecca has to go on bed rest, someone will need to watch Oliver during the day. Daycare is expensive, and with the medical bills..." He trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks. They needed free babysitting. They needed me to be useful again. "I see," I said. "And what makes you think I'd be willing to help after what happened?" "Because you're Oliver's grandmother," Michael said quietly. "Because despite everything that's happened between us, I know you love him, and he loves you." He was right, of course. I would do anything for Oliver, even if it meant helping the parents who had tried to rob me. "If I agree to this," I said slowly, "there will be conditions, clear boundaries about what I will and won't do, and absolutely no discussion of money or financial help." "Of course," Michael said quickly. "We just need someone Oliver trusts to take care of him." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Rebecca's condition worsened, requiring complete bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Oliver would need full-time care, which meant I would essentially be living at their house 5 days a week. It wasn't what I'd planned for my retirement, but the alternative was letting my grandson suffer because of his parents' mistakes. "Are you sure about this?" Mrs. Chen asked when I told her about the arrangement. "They're asking a lot after what they put you through." "I'm not doing it for them," I explained. "I'm doing it for Oliver. He needs stability and love, and I'm probably the only person who can provide both right now." Mrs. Chen nodded understandingly. "Just promise me you won't let them take advantage of your good heart again." It was a promise I intended to keep. This time I was going into the situation with my eyes wide open. This time I had boundaries. This time I had legal protection, thanks to Catherine Walsh's ironclad trust. Caring for Oliver full-time was both exhausting and wonderful. He was smart, funny, curious about everything. We spent mornings reading books and afternoons exploring the neighborhood. I taught him to identify different birds in the garden and how to make simple snacks. He helped me fold laundry and told me elaborate stories about his toy dinosaurs. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely needed and appreciated. not for my money, but for my love and attention, for my ability to make him feel safe and happy. Rebecca, confined to bed upstairs, was a different challenge. She was bored, uncomfortable, and worried about the baby. Sometimes she was grateful for my help. Other times she was critical and demanding, treating me more like hired help than family. Oliver shouldn't be watching so much television, she would call down from her bedroom, or make sure you use the organic vegetables for his lunch. I bit my tongue and reminded myself that pregnant women under stress weren't always rational. Michael tried to be helpful when he came home from work, but he was clearly overwhelmed by the responsibility of supporting a family during a high-risk pregnancy. Medical bills were mounting. His job was stressful. The house felt tense with unspoken worries about money and the future. I found myself becoming the stabilizing force in Oliver's life, the one constant adult who wasn't stressed or preoccupied with problems he couldn't understand. It was a role I'd never expected to play, but one that felt natural and important. One evening, while Oliver played quietly with his blocks, Michael sat down at the kitchen table where I was preparing his dinner. "Mother, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "What we did at the restaurant with the lawyers, it was wrong. We were scared about money and the baby coming, and we made terrible decisions." I looked at my son, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes for the first time in months. "Yes," I said simply, "it was wrong. It hurt me more than you can imagine." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, and I'm sorry. Watching you with Oliver these past weeks, seeing how much you love him, how much he needs you, I realize what we almost threw away." He paused, struggling with words. "I was so focused on giving Oliver things, expensive things, that I forgot he needs people more than possessions. He needs his grandmother more than he needs a fancy wedding or imported marble countertops." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start, a recognition that family relationships couldn't be reduced to financial transactions. Rebecca went into labor on a rainy Thursday morning in July. Michael called from the hospital, his voice tight with worry. "The baby's coming early. Can you stay with Oliver?" Of course I could. Oliver and I spent the day making paper airplanes and creating welcome cards for his new sibling. He was excited about becoming a big brother, chattering non-stop about all the things he would teach the baby. "I'll show her how to color inside the lines," he said seriously, "and how to pet cats without scaring them." Sophie Rebecca Johnson was born at 2:23 p.m., weighing 6 pounds and 4 ounces, small but healthy, with her father's dark hair and what the nurses claimed were her grandmother's eyes. When Michael called with the news, I cried with relief and joy. Despite everything that had happened between us, this was still my grandchild, still a precious new life that I would love unconditionally. "Can we see her?" Oliver asked, tugging on my sleeve. "Can we go meet my baby sister?" The hospital visit was emotional and complicated. Rebecca looked exhausted but happy, holding tiny Sophie like she was made of spun glass. Oliver was fascinated by his sister, wanting to touch her tiny hands and count her miniature fingers. "She's so small," he whispered in awe. "Was I ever that little?" I assured him that he had been, that all babies start small and grow bigger with love and care. Michael watched us interact with his children, and I could see something shifting in his expression, understanding maybe, or regret for what we'd all almost lost. "Mother," Rebecca said quietly, while Michael took Oliver to see the nursery, "I want to thank you for everything you've done these past months, taking care of Oliver helping with the house, being there when we needed you." She paused, looking down at baby Sophie. "I know we haven't always been fair to you. The thing with the lawyers, trying to pressure you about money, it wasn't right." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from Rebecca, and I appreciated the effort, even if it felt incomplete. "I did it for Oliver," I said honestly. "And now I'll do it for Sophie too, because that's what grandmothers do. We love our grandchildren unconditionally, even when their parents make mistakes." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I was so worried about providing for them, about making sure they had everything they needed, that I forgot what they needed most was a stable, loving family. She looked up at me. "Will you help us figure out how to be that kind of family?" The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were better. Real conversations replaced polite small talk. Michael and Rebecca started asking for my advice instead of demanding my money. When Sophie had colic and wouldn't stop crying, they called me for help instead of hiring expensive consultants. When Oliver started asking questions about why families sometimes fight, we worked together to give him age-appropriate answers that emphasized love and forgiveness. I felt like we were building something new, something healthier than what we'd had before. Oliver's 5th birthday party was held in my backyard under the oak tree where I'd pushed Michael on a swing 35 years earlier. Nothing fancy, just family and a few neighborhood children. Oliver wore a simple shirt I'd bought for him, and his face glowed with happiness as he opened handmade gifts and played simple games. "This is the best party ever," he declared, frosting smeared across his cheeks. Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances over his head, finally understanding that the best things in life couldn't be bought. "You know," Michael said to me as we cleaned up paper plates and deflated balloons, "I used to think success meant having enough money to buy anything we wanted. But watching Oliver today, seeing how happy he is with simple pleasures, I realize I had it backwards." He paused, folding chairs with the methodical movements of someone working through complicated thoughts. "Success is having people who love you for who you are, not what you can provide." It was hard-won wisdom, learned through almost losing what mattered most. The trust fund Catherine had established remained untouched, earning interest and growing steadily for Oliver and Sophie's future education. Michael and Rebecca never mentioned it, never hinted that they'd like access to it. They seemed to understand finally that some things were more valuable than money: love, trust, respect, the knowledge that family members would be there for each other without conditions or ulterior motives. These couldn't be bought or stolen or signed over in legal documents. They had to be earned and maintained through daily choices and actions. One Sunday afternoon, as I sat in my garden watching Oliver chase fireflies while Sophie napped in her stroller, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The pain of that terrible dinner at Antonio's, the fear and anger of being threatened and manipulated, the loneliness of choosing dignity over family pressure. All of it had led to this moment of peace and genuine connection. Not the superficial harmony we'd had before, built on my willingness to be taken advantage of, but something deeper and more honest. "Grandma," Oliver called, running over with a dandelion clutched in his small fist. "Look what I found, a wish flower." He held it up for me to admire, his face serious with the importance of his discovery. "What are you going to wish for?" I asked, taking the dandelion and examining it with appropriate gravity. He considered this carefully, his 5-year-old mind weighing the possibilities. "I wish for our family to always be happy," he said finally, "and for baby Sophie to learn to sleep through the night so Mommy stops being so tired." "Those are very good wishes," I told him, helping him blow the seeds into the afternoon breeze. As we watched them drift away on the wind, I made my own silent wish. Not for money or material things, but for the wisdom to continue building healthy relationships with my family. For the strength to maintain my boundaries while keeping my heart open to love. For many more afternoons like this one, where being together was enough, where love wasn't measured in dollars, but in moments of simple joy. Michael appeared from the house, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of a man who'd learned to appreciate what he had instead of worrying about what he lacked. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, settling into the lawn chair beside mine. "We're making wishes," Oliver announced importantly, climbing onto my lap with the easy affection of a child who felt completely secure. "Daddy, do you want to make a wish too?" Michael smiled, looking around at his family gathered in the peaceful garden. "I think all my wishes already came true," he said quietly. That evening, after Michael's family had gone home and the garden was quiet except for the sound of crickets, I called Mrs. Chen to share the day's events. "It sounds wonderful," she said warmly. "You should be proud of how you handled everything. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to their own children like that." "It wasn't courage," I corrected. "It was necessity. I had to choose between being respected and being used, between teaching my grandchildren about healthy relationships and showing them that love could be bought." "And look how it turned out," Mrs. Chen pointed out. "You have your dignity, your independence, and your family. Not everyone who faces that kind of situation ends up with all 3. She was right. I'd been lucky, or maybe blessed, that Michael and Rebecca had eventually seen the error of their ways. Not all families survive financial manipulation attempts. Not all children learn from their mistakes. I'd gained more than I'd lost by refusing to be a victim. I'd gained self-respect and genuine relationships built on mutual care rather than financial dependency. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, frightened, manipulated, willing to sacrifice my financial security to maintain family peace. She seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more confident in her own worth. Someone who understood that love without respect wasn't really love at all. Someone who knew that the most important inheritance she could leave her grandchildren wasn't money, but the example of a woman who refused to be diminished by other people's greed. The burgundy sweater still hung in my closet, but I'd added other clothes, brighter colors, more confident styles, clothes for a woman who was still writing her own story instead of just playing supporting roles in other people's dramas. I'd started taking pottery classes at the community center. I'd joined a hiking group. I'd even begun dating again, having dinner with a widowed gentleman I'd met at the animal shelter. Life was full of possibilities that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother or potential victim. 7 months later, I stood in the same garden, but everything had changed. Oliver was helping me plant daffodil bulbs for next spring's blooms. Sophie was taking her first wobbly steps across the grass, squealing with delight each time she managed 3 or 4 steps before sitting down hard. Michael and Rebecca were planning a simple wedding anniversary celebration, focusing on the love that had brought them together, rather than the material things that had nearly torn their family apart. We'd all learned valuable lessons about what really mattered. Tell me the story again, Grandma, Oliver said as we worked in the rich soil. The story about the brave lady who wouldn't let the mean people take her money. It had become one of his favorite bedtime stories, though I'd adapted it significantly for young ears. In Oliver's version, the brave lady was a princess who protected her treasure from greedy dragons, eventually teaching them that sharing and kindness were more valuable than gold. Once upon a time, I began, there was a princess who lived in a beautiful garden. As I told the familiar story, I realized that Oliver was learning more than just entertainment. He was learning about boundaries, about self-respect, about the difference between people who loved you and people who wanted to use you. These were lessons that would serve him well as he grew up and encountered his own dragons, whether they were family members or strangers. The most precious gift I could give him wasn't money in a trust fund, but the knowledge that he was valuable for who he was, not what he could provide. Michael joined us in the garden, picking up Sophie and spinning her around until the baby giggled with pure joy. "Mother," he said, settling cross-legged on the grass beside us, "I have something to tell you. Rebecca and I have been talking, and we want you to know that we're grateful for everything you've taught us this past year, about family, about priorities, about what really matters." He paused, watching Oliver dig small holes for the daffodil bulbs with intense concentration. "We're better parents because of how you handled our mistakes." "You're better parents because you chose to learn from your mistakes," I corrected gently. "I just refused to enable them." It was an important distinction. I hadn't fixed their problems or changed their hearts through some magical grandmother wisdom. They'd done the hard work of examining their priorities and choosing different paths. They'd learned to value relationships over possessions, love over money, integrity over immediate gratification. These were lessons they'd had to learn for themselves, though I'd provided the circumstances that made learning necessary. As the sun began to set over our quiet garden, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Not the false peace of avoiding conflict, but the real satisfaction of standing up for what was right. My relationship with Michael and Rebecca would never be the same as it had been before. It was better, built on honesty instead of manipulation, respect instead of entitlement, genuine love instead of financial dependency. We'd all paid a price for this growth, but it had been worth every difficult moment. "Grandma," Oliver said, tugging on my sleeve, "when I grow up, I want to be brave like the princess in the story." "You already are brave, sweetheart," I told him, pulling him close for a hug that smelled like sunshine and dirt and infinite possibilities. "You're brave every time you try something new, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you love someone with your whole heart." He nodded solemnly, accepting this wisdom with the seriousness that children bring to important truths. That night, as I tucked Oliver into his bed for his weekly sleepover at Grandma's house, he asked one final question. "Will you always protect us, Grandma? Even when we're grown up?" I smoothed his hair back from his forehead, thinking about all the ways that love could be expressed and protected. "I'll always love you," I promised, "and I'll always do what's best for you, even if it's not what you want at the time. That's what grandmothers do. We love you enough to be strong when we need to be." He smiled sleepily, secure in the knowledge that some things in life were absolutely dependable. Love, protection, the fierce loyalty of a grandmother who'd learned the difference between being used and being needed. As he drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together as a family that had been tested and emerged stronger. A family that understood the true value of unconditional love.